I don't want to become a pathetic rock and roller and take a slow climb down like a lot of people do, so I won't be doing Crocodile Rock in 6 years' time. I don't want to be Chuck Berry. When I'm 40, I don't want to be charging around the countryside doing concerts. Here we are.
Do you feel, or do you think that you're going to end up a kind of sort of a middle-aged ex-rock star, or what?
God forbid, no. I hopefully got 2 or 3 years left where I can have a good time. As long as you're having a good time, then you're okay. And I am still having a good time.
I must ask you how it feels to be 30.
It doesn't feel any different to me, actually. People have been asking me that all day. How does it feel to be 30? It doesn't feel any different. It hasn't sunk in yet. I don't know. I just feel absolutely normal. What a stupid thing to say.
But do you think it's actually going to make a difference to your career? I mean, do you think perhaps you are getting to the stage now where you're getting a bit old for the pop business?
I don't really consider age to be that important, but I must admit there are many other things in my life that I want to do apart from record and tour around the world. I mean, I have many more strings to my bow now, and I'm much happier about it. I think you have to spread your wings a little bit, because otherwise you get bored with what you're doing.
I should think also it can actually put you a bit out of touch with the young teenage fans, can't it? The older you get.
Yeah, I mean, I look at TV programs and I'm going, God, they're dreadful, you know. God, they shouldn't be allowed on TV. And I think, I sound like my mother when I first started out. You know, she was always criticising. I don't lose touch. I listen to a lot of records and I listen to the radio and I read a lot. But as I say, it's not so much of an important thing to me anymore. As it was when I first started out in 1969.
When you see groups like Wham,
they're fabulous.
Or Duran Duran,
they're great, and I like Boy George, and I think it's very unfair to pick on them because go and see them first and then make up your mind. And I've met these bands, and they've got so much energy they make you feel exhausted, because that's how Bernie and I used to be at 21 years of age, seeing Wham, seeing George, seeing those bands, Nick Kershaw and people like that. Fabulous. Oh, good luck to them. They're making great music. They're not doing anybody any harm, and I think give them a chance. You know, they're great. I really enjoy their music, and I think it's very silly just to dismiss things.
Yeah. But you looking at them, do they make you feel your age?
I do feel like a grandfather when I walk into the dressing room. You know, it's kind of like meeting the Queen. Don't say anything. But it's kind of like, what do you say? There is an age gap. One feels an age gap. But they've always made me feel very welcome, and I'm basically a shy person anyway. And I do feel a difference. But some of the music they're making is tremendous, and they've always been very, very nice to me.
Do you feel that your flamboyance has diminished? Do you feel that you've changed at all? I mean, marriage and settling down obviously is bound to change.
I'm getting a bit more hinge and bracket, really, I suppose, in that direction. I'll always be sort of flamboyant in a certain way. I don't want to lose that part of that. But yes, I've toned down. I've had to tone down for my football club, for example, because there's no way I could turn up to Watford in this suit, otherwise the manager would fire me. Absolutely true. And I wouldn't dream of it.
Well, it's kind of gratifying to still be able to make records that do get in the charts, even though, you know, the peak of my career, I had the records that came in, the albums that came in at #1 and everything. Those things don't happen anymore because there's a new range of bunch of people around. But it's still nice to be able to be amongst them. There's a real whole new generation of other.
Do you actually feel though that you've been in the business that length of time, or is it just
sometimes when I look at the other ones? Yes, the newer contingent. Absolutely, I kind of feel like a bit of a grandfather, and I'm not even 40 yet. But you do tend to see it because when you look at someone like George Michael, who's 21. And see how much talent he's got, and so how he's got his head screwed on there. It's quite frightening. At 21, I was a hopeless mess. So I didn't even make records. So yes, I do feel kind of old sometimes.
I feel very young again. It's like, this is fun, let's do it. The moment it stops being fun, then I will stop again. But it's if you're a musician and you're creative, and you feel creative, then go out there and do it. If it's becoming a routine, just stop.
40 years young.
Yeah, 40 years. I mean, I feel the same way as I did in 1970. I'm just like a little kid. There's that side of me that makes me very happy when I'm just bouncing all the time, and that's happening at the moment. I've got to be very thankful for that after all this time. After 16 years, you serious? I feel like I do now. It's incredible.
Looking at you, for people who perhaps have not seen you in a few years, I think you're wearing this nice, attractive suede outfit, nothing outrageous. Is the outrageousness part of it over?
I'm 47 on the next birthday.
Yeah, now you can Now you can be eccentric. You can move into the next
I think
stage.
I'm more eccentric than outrageous. I mean, I went through those costumes and I had fun doing it. The costumes used to hide a lot,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
They used to cover up. Because I was quite large too, I used to think, well, I'll wear a big outfit and people won't notice how large I am. Of course, it accentuated the size. And people looked at you more because you looked kind of outrageous.
Did you change with the times, or do you think new people just discovered you all along the way?
I don't think I've changed along the times very much. I mean, there's been so much new music happening while I've been writing songs. I mean, the punk thing came in the early 80s, and then black music completely changed with rap coming in and hip-hop. And I have to just stick with what I'm good at. I did once make a disco album when the disco broke, yeah, and that was it was a good idea, but it was too late really, and it didn't really work too well. And so I just tried to stay clear of all the fads and just do what I do best, which is write songs with Bernie.
But your outfit's changed over the years, but not the music.
Everything's changed. Oh, the
You
waistline
had
goes
some
up, he
doozies.
goes
Whoa.
down, he goes up, he goes down. Yeah, there's a lot of things that have changed. I mean, God, in 26 years, if nothing changes, then you're in a pretty bad way.
I don't want to become a pathetic rock and roller and take a slow climb down like a lot of people do. So I won't be doing crocodile rock in 6 years' time. I don't want to be Chuck Berry. When I'm 40, I don't want to be charging around the countryside doing concerts. Here we are.
Me and my big mouth, right?
As I said on the first night, it's always great to come back to this area.
Rock and roll per se is a young man's business, and it still is. I mean, all the young bands that are happening now, good luck to them. And it's, I don't consider myself a rock and roll artist. I mean, we play rock and roll on stage, but I consider myself as a singer-songwriter who plays the piano, which is probably what I've always been. But if I gave up playing music, it would be like, for me, kind of having to, I don't know, it'd be like losing an arm or something. You can make records, you can write songs, and they're very enjoyable processes sometimes. But playing live to people and having that contact and that love between the artist and its audience is irreplaceable.
During this interview, Elton referred often to his age, which prompted the obvious question, do you feel old?
No, I don't. But I mean, as I said before, we do live in an ageist society. We do, people like Jamiroquai find it hard to get played on Radio 1 in England. I mean, and come on, that's ridiculous. And radio stations, it's all fragmented now. So if you've got a great record and you're 40 years of age, it's hard to get it played on a hip radio station.
Are you worried about getting older? 57 these days is very young.
I'm quite proud of getting older and still being able to do shows like this.
I am not a fashion expert, so this has been told to me by staff, that you wore a Yohji Yamamoto black suit last night with a silver tie. Downright plain compared to other costumes you've worn.
Yeah.
Is this correct?
It is correct, yes.
What happened?
Well, I mean, I couldn't wear some of my giant chicken outfits to the Oscar party, A, because I wouldn't fit in them anymore, and B, because, I'm 61 years of age in next month, and, I don't dress as flamboyantly as I used to. But I still had, a nice silver Chanel tie and a sparkly shirt, but it's, there are certain things that I don't do anymore.
Because of your age and maturity?
Yeah, and you don't feel like, as you get older, you change the way you think, the way you dress. I always like to dress a little differently from other people, but I'm nowhere near the fashion victim that I was a long time ago.
Did you know Elvis? I met Elvis for 2 minutes when I played Washington in 1976. It was the only time I've met him.
What was your impression of him in those 2 minutes?
I thought he looked extremely ill, and I felt very sorry for him then. I thought, my God, I hope I don't, and I don't mean this insultingly, I hope this never happens to me.
What do you think really happened to him? Do you think he was into drugs or what? Do you believe what you read about the autopsy? The heart?
I don't think I can believe anything that I read because I don't know what is the truth. I'm not really in a position to judge what happened to him. I just think it's tragic what did happen to him because I still think that he was a tremendous talent. He had the best voice. And it's obviously surrounded by the wrong people, I would put it down to. Having seen people in other similar situations sort of go the same way, I would say it's all down to the people around you. and the way they lead you and the way they pick off you and the way they suck the energy out of you and tell you you're wonderful and everything, and they just
the
take
entourage, the hangers
everything
on.
creative out of you, all the energy out of you, and eventually you just you're nothing. And it's terribly sad. But I would probably blame it on the people surrounding him.
Well, Elvis, when I saw him in Washington, bless his heart, and I'm a huge Elvis fan, it was so sad because he turned into this big man with no eyes, it's sunken in the back of his head, and it was pathetic. And in the end, there are pictures of me when I look at them and I think, oh my God, you know, you turned into Elvis. You just shut your door and you gained weight and you did this and you did that and you didn't care how you were, and it's very easy to do that.
But when you saw him, you thought you didn't want to end up like that.
I knew he would be dead within a year if he carried on like that, and he was.
Really? And he was.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Now, a New York writer quoted you as saying just recently about ego, that you wrote ego about a lot of people. And he quoted David Bowie and said that you thought he was a pseudo intellect and you didn't like pseudo intellects. And that the Rolling Stones, as much as they were good on stage, good on record, were boring on stage. I mean, did you really write ego about those sort of people?
Absolutely.
A reflection of the 70s?
Yeah.
Why?
There's a lot of me in it as well. I'm not just saying that. Because I just thought it's true, you know. There's so many, I mean, there's a report in the local paper today that says Elton John has simple taste. He only wants 28 gallons of caviar a day fed into his intravenously.
You said that without the Beatles, probably none of the rest of us would be here today. So you clearly have always been a Beatles fan.
Yes. Well, at the time that 60s thing happened with the Beatles, I was at school, at grammar school, and about 13, 14, everybody sort of was in a group, or there was a local group, more groups around than there are today, and I think the songs more than anything, and the fact that they were considered outrageous when they happened. I mean, God, those haircuts and jackets, they influenced me just from the songwriting point of view. Lennon, McCartney, there's no question of it. No one will ever equal the quality, the amount of songs they wrote, the quality of the songs they wrote. Forget Rodgers and Hammerstein, Lerner, and other people will probably say, well, come on. But for the amount of songs they wrote, those two people were the finest songwriters this century, by far.
What do you think of the current spot? What do you think of, for example, Madonna? I knew you were going to ask me. I think she's a brilliant, brilliant marketing expert. All right. I'd rather read a Barbara Carlton novel than play Madonna. No, that's not fair. There are a couple of her records that are really good. I'm not really into it. I don't like people who don't really sing on stage. I don't like the Janet Jacksons, Madonna, people that, sing mime on stage. It's not my thing, man.
What do you think of the whole business with Michael Jackson?
God. I was kind of involved when Michael came to Britain. I put him in touch with the therapist that he was seeing when he came to England. Michael came here. Michael sat in this very room, came for lunch.
How was he?
He was fragile. I know for a fact that he'd been about the amount of painkillers people have been giving him and stuff like that. And I know that he had it wasn't a case of running out the country for an excuse. He had a real problem.
And you gave him to a therapist who would help him with
I
drugs?
put him in touch. And they said the wonderful thing, the press never found him the whole time over here, which I thought was great.
Here he is, Michael Jackson.
They can't find it. I can't
Michael
believe
Jackson's in the home of Elton John and the press can't find him.
It's strange, isn't it? Yeah.
Did you give him advice?
I just tried to give him encouragement. He was non-compos mentis, absolutely. He was like a zombie. And that's how he arrived in this country, a zombie. And that's not, it takes a while to get over that. And he's gone right back into that mayhem situation over there. I fear for him.
You think you should have settled?
I wouldn't have settled. I wouldn't care if I had to sell my last thing in life just to clear my name. I don't know anything about Michael Jackson's case whatsoever. I don't know any of the facts. I mean, all I know is that, if I'd have been innocent of those things, I would have said, I'm going for it.
I remember when we talked in 1994, you said that Michael Jackson had come and stayed with you in secret. Nobody knew.
No, he stayed at my manager's house, which was near to me, but he'd come over to have lunch and spend the day at my house when he was rehabilitating from pain pills or whatever or something.
People didn't know then that he was on drugs.
No, he was in a terrible state.
And did you help him get better?
No, because the only person that can help you get better is yourself. He was such a big star at that time. He couldn't have gone into a rehab or something like that. It would have been impossible. It was like a circus.
At that time, Michael Jackson had settled. There had been an accusation that he had molested a child, and he had settled. And you said that if you were innocent, you would never have settled.
Never settle. Your pride and your honor is at stake. No, I would never settle it.
But the most poignant thing I can say about Freddie is that when he was sick and he was dying, I used to go around and see him. I was one of the few people that did, and I couldn't stay there for very long. I stayed there for about an hour at a time. So I found it was so painful, so traumatizing to watch him, and he was so brave. And he was still spending money and buying things at auction right up to the point that he died, which I thought was hilarious, and the kind of thing I probably would do. But at that Christmas, after the Christmas just shortly after he died, I got a present delivered to me in a sheet, and I collect Henry Scott Tuke paintings, and it was a message, it was a painting by Henry Scott Tuke from Freddie saying, "Dear Sharon, hope you love this, love Melina," which was, you know, I just completely broke down. And to think of me as he was so ill, and he wanted to give that to me for Christmas, and he died about a month beforehand, and it was quite a choker. That was the kind of person he was.
I put the record straight. Tina Turner and I had a falling out at the VH1 Divas thing. She went and did the Oprah show and kind of bad-mouthed me and said I was a spoiled child. And in fact, I wanted to put the record straight on what really happened. I think at the end of the day, we were both culpable of, you know, I shouldn't have done what I did, but she drove me to it.
So it was her fault.
I made a mistake when I needed to show him how to play Proud Mary. The mistake is you don't show Elton John how to play his piano.
But she did. And Elton John's reaction?
You don't tell me how to play my piano. Oh, Lord, it just exploded. It was like the past slapping me back in the face, truly before all of those people, when all I simply was trying to do was get an arrangement. So then he stormed off. He just went into a rage, which he apologized later. He said he was wrong. He said, I was wrong, I'm sorry.
But she canceled the tour and the multi-million-dollar payday that would have come with it.
Divas and bitches. My goodness. He's not like Jagger or like some of the other people that's professional enough to give a bit when two people are working together to make it work. He's just very sensitive. Very, very sensitive.
The mid-'70s, John Lennon asked you to play on two songs, one of which was Whatever Gets You Through the Night, and that contribution led to one of the most famous bets in the history of music.
And you said to him, I'll play on that, but if this thing goes to #1, which I believe it will, I want you to come and do a live concert with me.
Yeah, but that was the bribe. I mean, I sang on it and I played on it, and then I said, listen, if this gets to #1, and he said, no, it's not going to get to #1. And of course, ultimately, it did. And by Jove, it did get to #1. And then he had to keep his promise, which he did, at Madison Square Garden in Thanksgiving. And it was one of the most magical moments of my life. Probably, for me, the memory of him coming on stage and getting so much applause.
By inviting someone up with us onto stage. And I'm sure he will be no stranger to anybody in the audience when I say it's our great privilege and your great privilege to see and hear Mr. John Lennon.
John came on stage at Madison Square Garden to the biggest ovation I've ever heard at that time in my life, because the last time he played in New York was with the Beatles at Shea Stadium. He'd done the Peace concert in Toronto, and then he decided, yes, he'd have to come on stage with it. And it was one of the most, we all cried because it was just so wonderful to hear someone get that much love back from his adopted city. And he loved New York, he loved America.
But John had really lost touch with sound systems and light shows and whatever. I never went to shows.
And he was physically sick before he came on because he was so nervous. Yoko came to the show before and gave him a gardenia, which he wore.
And, you know, it just was like the stars were aligned, and he came on stage, and it was wonderful. We played, I saw her standing there, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, and Whatever Gets You Through the Night. And we all cried when he came on. He came on to the greatest reception, the loudest roar I've ever heard in Madison Square Garden. I've been there a lot. Phenomenal. And I think it really touched him because it showed him how much New Yorkers loved him. And, you know, you get that on the street. Hi, John, how you going? But when you get in front of an audience of 20,000 people making that noise and the affirmation that we love you, John, you're a New Yorker. Wow, it was pretty amazing.
Emotional about your times on stage with him?
Oh, well, he came on stage with us once at Madison Square Garden, and I've never seen an audience react like that or grown men cry like that. I mean, you know, you have typical hardened Scottish road managers, and every band usually has a Scottish road manager, English band anyway, and stand there just in tears.
And it led to, you know, him playing Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. It led to me being Sean, his son's godfather. It led to him rekindling his romance with Yoko. So it was a magical evening. You know, it was just a magical moment in one's life to see someone so loved getting that so much acclaim. And, you know, I had such a great time with John for 2 years. And it's one of the highlights of my life and my career.
I think, actually, it might have been the last time he played live. But
it was.
Elton John flew into Melbourne from Brisbane just before 6 tonight. His manager told him the sad news of Lennon's death only moments before he emerged from the plane to face waiting newsmen. It was only a few weeks ago that he last saw Lennon in America, just prior to leaving for the tour here.
What's your immediate reaction?
I just too stunned to say. I've just been told.
How long had you known John Lennon for?
5 years.
How would you assess his loss to the music world, Elton, at this stage?
I'm just too upset to comment, and I mean, I just can't even think about that. I'm talking about less of a friend. Lennon's friendship with Elton John saw the pair appear at a Madison Square Garden concert together, the only public appearance Lennon's made in 5 years. Elton John is also the godfather of Lennon's son, Sean.
We were flying from Brisbane to Melbourne, and John Reid, my manager, was already in Melbourne. And the whole band was on the plane, and the road crew and everything. And when we got to Melbourne, they said the whole of the Elton John party must all stay on the plane. And I knew something instinctively was wrong. And whenever I go away, I always think of my grandmother, who's quite elderly, who lives at my house. And I always think, oh, God, I hope nothing's happened to her. And when my manager came on the plane, he was crying. So I thought, oh, Christ, you know, something has happened. And I knew instinctively someone was dead. But when he told me that John was dead, I couldn't believe it. I mean, I was in shock. I didn't show any emotion whatsoever. Everybody else had a great effect on them immediately. It didn't have an effect on me immediately.
And I was rung up by all the news agencies for quotes. There's nothing one can say about his music. His music speaks for itself. My friendship with John, of all the people I'd met in the entertainment business, he was the one I looked up to the most. He had, it was just I don't want to go into eulogies or anything because it's very private. But the biggest compliment I can pay him is that he was one of the most humble people I'd met, and he taught me a hell of a lot, and he was just one of the most fascinating people and kindest.
That night I thought, well, we went out to an Indian restaurant. My mother and father were on tour with me as well, and they'd met John. And we all got absolutely blind drunk and had a great time and sang songs and everything like that. It was only till I was doing Imagine on the whole tour.
This is a very beautiful song, you all know it. He only lives just over the road, and he hasn't made a record for ages, but he's doing one at the moment. Imagine there's no heaven.
Yeah, and it's only till I played Imagine 3 days later in Melbourne that it hit home. But it still doesn't hit home to me because I still don't think he's dead. I always think of him as still being alive.
Which seemed silly to other people at the time. The people look back on it with fond memories because he was part of their lives, and I just think I can't see anybody having that effect on an audience.
How did that whole thing, I mean, other than the personal effect it must have had on you because you were friends, but what did it make you think about your life and in terms of this whole kind of
doesn't change my mind at all. I mean, if you go around thinking that that might happen to you, then you're gonna get totally paranoid. It was just one of the most tragic things that everyone in the music business has ever been through. I think you can't go around thinking, well, it's going to happen to me, because it's just a one-off thing. You can get knocked over by a bus. Who knows what? That's what life's. The excitement about life is not knowing.
You didn't change any.
No, if someone's going to do something like no, it's I can understand McCartney doing it or something like that, because there's so many crazy people who would probably think, oh, now one's gone, let's have a go at the others. Especially in this bloody country, because I come from a country where we don't have handguns and stuff like that, so it's never bothered me. You don't walk around the streets in London thinking that someone may cost you over the head or something like that, but they won't shoot you, So no, it never really bothered me that.
During the latter part of his, the last 2 or 3 years of his life, I didn't see him hardly. We used to phone up. I used to phone him up maybe once in a blue moon, or he used to send me a Christmas card. But friendship doesn't, you don't have to phone each other up sometimes when you're friends.
And he was a real friend. Even though I didn't see him that often, we didn't really have to.
Yeah, but you see, good friends don't have to call all the time, or they don't have to send letters all the time.
Because you know instinctively that,
And I never really told him how much I loved him. You don't, do you? People go and you think, I wish I could have said something before you went, but you never know. In those circumstances, the way he died, you can't do that.
But when I first met him, I've never honestly met anybody who's influenced me so much, who I respected so much, and I cared for so much. I mean, you met John Lennon and you fell in love with the guy. He was incredible. I mean, he taught me so much. He was amazing.
Now, when I talked about the newspaper column that said you were going to dedicate an album, you were shaking your head. Does that mean that was an erroneous newspaper report?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I'm not going to dedicate an album to John. I've already done one, so I'm not saying anymore.
Talk to me about Empty Garden, if you would, the genesis of the song.
Yeah. Well, when John was killed, having been close to him for a length of time, and getting to know him, and
well, if you're going to write something, don't do it now, for God's sake. Let time pass. And then I suddenly thought, well, you can't write lyrics. So, you really start. I didn't tell Bernie to write anything, and Bernie came over last August or whatever to Paris with a bunch of lyrics, one of which was Empty Garden. And he didn't push it forward or anything. I just looked at it and I said, is this what I think of? It's fairly obvious what it was about. And it said everything I wanted to say without being sort of too cloying and everything. And it was one of those talking lyrics where I thought it was so perfect for me that I just sat down and wrote the song immediately, and the song came out straight away. I just looked at the words, and there was the melody coming out.
And on stage last year when we toured the States and we did a lot of open air shows, it really went down. It was a very atmospheric number to do on stage. I'm glad people liked it, because I would have hated to have done something about John and being sincere about John, and people thought it was a bit in bad taste. So.
Did you see Yoko and Sean when you were over in New York this last time, playing the concert there?
They came, I played Empty Garden, which is a tribute to John, written by Bernie Taupin. And I thought on the tour, when we get to New York, that's going to be the town where if I'm going to get emotional about anything, that's going to happen. So I didn't get emotional. I was very relieved. And I got up after the number and I was tallying myself down. This is the first night at Madison Square Garden. And then all of a sudden I saw there was Yoko and Sean on stage. And the whole place just erupted for 5-6 minutes. And that was a very emotional moment, because I hadn't seen Sean really since he was a little baby. And then Yoko, I was speaking to Yoko, he said, you must come and spend time with Sean, because he grew up with John as a father, and John spent a lot of time with him all the time. And he needs that relationship with somebody being near him. So I went over and bought him a boat and spent some time with him. And it was great, it was very gratifying. And when you become a godfather, it's easy to say, in fact, I've got 5 godchildren, and it's easy to say, yes, I'll become godfather. But in that certain circumstance, one has the responsibility, and she wants me to carry that out, probably, Mum, because she's handled the situation extremely well, and he's an incredible kid. He's a sweet kid.
Famously, you were very close to Princess Diana, but even before that, I think you played at Prince Andrew's 21st?
Yes, at Windsor Castle.
And it was terrifying because we came on stage and there was these like 10 gold chairs that were empty, and we knew who they were there for. And you can't play something like that thinking, is it too loud? Are they going to like this? Are they going to blah, blah, blah? And I played for the royal family before, but it was still a terrifying experience.
We played and I came down, I changed, and I was in a ballroom with a band and Diana Spencer. She wasn't Prince Charles's wife then. She was all alone in this empty kind of ballroom, and we chatted and we talked about the wedding that was coming up and all that bit. And then we went into the next room where the dance band was, and she said, do you want to dance? So I can't dance anyway, but we did a faux Charleston. You don't refuse someone like Princess Diana. And then we went into dinner, and then it was a buffet dinner, and then Princess Anne said, shall we go to the disco? And I said, fine, it's the quietest disco you've ever heard. And I was dancing with Princess Anne thinking, you know what, I was born in a council house. It's very surreal. And then the Queen came in, and she said, can we join you? And I said, say, no, f*** off, right? And they segued into Rock Around the Clock by Bill Haley, and I thought, this is ridiculous.
Oh, is she a good dancer? She shifts around. She's pretty good. She shifts around with a handbag on her arm. Because the Queen's going like, dun, dun, dun. And it was one of the most, to that point, surreal moments of my life, because, after being born in a council house in Pinner, and you think, and remembering Rock Around the Clock by Bill Haley, the odds of you dancing with the Queen at Windsor Castle were very, very long. It was considered to be a gay disease, and for someone who was within the royal family and who was a woman and who was straight, and to have someone care from the other side was an incredible gift.
Yeah, I mean, she had an energy.
Look at her face in every photograph. Absolutely. There's a positive, wonderful glow. Also, she had this incredible ability to make people feel at ease and make them feel that everything's going to be all right. I haven't experienced many people in my life that have that ability, but she could walk into a room of people and make them feel as if everything was great.
I know you and Princess Di went through a very close time and an estrangement and a close time again.
When you look back, was there one particular time when you and Princess Diana just had a ball together?
I had a dinner at my house, Windsor, and we invited about 30 people, some film stars, and Princess Diana was the guest of honor. We had, there was one special film star that she was very excited to see, and spent the whole evening talking to him cross-legged on the floor with those, Richard Gere.
I remember reading about
And the most incredible thing about Diana, she talked through her eyes. They're the most expressive eyes that you could possibly have imagined, and I just remember seeing her sitting on the floor, looking up on him in complete awe.
Diana, Princess of Wales, was a friend of Gianni Versace's as well as a devoted follower of his fashions. She made her way to the front row, sitting between two stars from the world of music, Elton John on her left, Sting on her right. There was much grief, none more open than Elton John's. Diana comforted him. He had already broken down as he stood earlier before the urn containing Versace's ashes. Elton John and Sting paid their own tribute to their friend, a rendition of the 23rd Psalm, "The Lord is my shepherd." It was heavy with emotion.
He was one of my best friends. I will love him forever as a person who had so much life, so much genius. And he was coming to Nice to stay with me in August. I still have his flight in my diary. I have his flight that he would come on. So for me, it's so sad, And for the world, they lost a very creative, strong man, a creative genius. But for me, I lost more than that. I lost someone who I love very much. I don't think it would happen here, not in Europe, but in America, I will take more protection. Yeah, it's so sad that you can't walk up the street to buy a newspaper And, you know, I will have to take more protection. It's a necessity now.
The death of Gianni Versace was a major blow to Elton. Versace's funeral provided, however, the last meeting with Diana, Princess of Wales.
She would have, no idea how much people loved her.
She had her, I'm sure, her periods of quite, desolate behavior and desolate feelings because you go any place you go, there's somebody following you with a camera, and that's very hard to put up with. People say, "Oh well, that's part and parcel." Let them try it.
What do you think about the paparazzi? Are they in part to blame for this tragedy?
Of course they are.
They are. What can be done about it? Any solutions?
The actual responsibility lies with the editors and the owners of the newspapers.
Because the public isn't saying, please take a picture in the bedroom, please take a picture in the car.
I think some of these things that they publish and some of the photographs that they pay for are disgraceful.
You've had the paparazzi all over you.
Yeah, but that's hardly the same as Princess Diana. This was one of the most famous people in the world. I mean, you have the Pope, Mother Teresa, and Princess Diana.
I don't think you've ever forgiven the paparazzi, have you?
No, I don't like the paparazzi. I don't like fame anymore. I was comfortable with it when I was younger, and I would go to the opening of wallets, and it's different when you're young. I'm 57 now.
Now she is frozen in time, forever, at the height of her beauty. How will you remember Princess Diana?
But I think of her as someone who was desperately searching for love and happiness within herself and in her personal life, and was giving everything to others and maybe hadn't been given enough love of her own. And now she's dead. She would have, no idea how much people loved her. It's a shame that she couldn't have known that in her lifetime. Hopefully people will carry on and remember what she stood for and remember that she was compassionate and kind. And there's not enough of that in this world.
I think originally we were talking about possibly writing a completely different song, but time was of the essence. So I suggested, I think it was me that suggested, why don't we just rewrite the lyrics to Candle in the Wind, because it seems appropriate. And so I just sat down and did it in probably half an hour.
It's been announced that Elton John is likely to be singing Candle in the Wind at part of the service. Do you think that that's a nice touch or a fitting tribute?
I think it's a very nice song for him to sing, but I wonder whether he'll be able to sing it fully, that he'll become too emotional to cope with it.
I heard you say that was possibly the only time you ever really got stage fright, in a way.
Well, it was an enormous responsibility, and I'd been singing that song for so many years as Goodbye Norma Jean, and I thought if I don't concentrate, I had to call on all my professionalism. I cry very easily, and in a situation like that, where one is in a church and you have a choir and there's sacred music, which I find very beautiful. She kept her cool for me when at Gianni's funeral, and she held her composure. I've got to do the same for her. Being Elton John, to pull that off, and I'm doing it for the people outside all around the world, and so I had a teleprompter, just in case I didn't want to sing Goodbye Norma Jean. I could have been garroted on the spot. And so, yes, that was kind of nerve-wracking, and I pulled it off because I had to. It's like, you have to man up in situations like that, and you call on your experience, and you've had so much experience, use it and do it.
Skills can't deliver at the toughest moment.
I'll never forget it. It was quite remarkable.
I wanted to sing it beautifully for her. I wanted to sing it beautifully for the public and for the family. And, with that amount of audience, you've got to draw on all your experience, and you have to just grit your teeth and get it and do it properly. And I didn't really, the funeral was beautiful, and I watched it when I went home. And then I kind of broke down when I watched the funeral when I got home, but I couldn't afford to do that. I'm an entertainer, and my job was to sing it, and it was to sing it beautifully for her.
It was Elton's decision to release the new version of Candle in the Wind with Something About the Way You Look Tonight, the first single from his new album, The Big Picture.
I just thought if people wanted a reminder of this, I didn't want to put it on my album because some people may not be fans of mine that may want this record. And all the money, of course, will go to the Prince's Foundation.
I don't think it's really necessarily about Elton John. It's just possessing something from that huge historical thing, you know, that event of Diana's death.
The new lyrics to Candle in the Wind don't refer to the hounding of the press as the original did, but include new words which say, the grace that placed itself where lives were torn apart.
The initial orders, the initial shipment, I believe, was 8 million copies. Manufacturers were only able to ship half, and they projected it's going to be the biggest selling single of all time. And I'd have to agree, judging from the turnout tonight.
Yes, it has been amazing. It is the fastest selling single record that's ever been in history.
The anniversary of her, well, her birthdays came up, the anniversary of her death, 10th anniversary soon.
No.
Will you be singing Goodbye English Rose? You said you'll only sing that at the request of the princes. Is that something you
I specifically would not like to sing it.
No.
And I've got that message to Prince William and Prince Harry. And I honestly think if I sang that, it would bring the whole atmosphere down. It would recreate something that's sad, and this is supposed to be a day remembering the joyous things about her life. And I really don't think, after singing it once, that you can sing it again.
We're such a close friend of Princess Diana's. When you see them walking down the aisle, what do you think you're going to feel?
Great joy, because the last time we were in Westminster Abbey, my heart sank when I saw those two boys walking behind the coffin. I thought that was the hardest thing. I can't imagine at that young age having to walk in the public following your mother's coffin, and the next time we're in the Abbey, it's to see him walking up the aisle with a beautiful woman and the love of his life. And I think it's the most joyous result, and I'm sure Diana would be very, very happy about it. The press are going to give you a bumpy ride. They're going to love you, they're going to hate you. I just hope they love each other enough to stay away from all that.
On Thursday, Elton John remembered the late Princess of Wales with a touching tribute. The 70-year-old music legend posted a throwback photo smiling from ear to ear with his pal, captioned, 20 years ago today, the world lost an angel.
When you gave that interview to the Rolling Stone and talked about sexuality, did you think that it would have the after effects that it's had? I mean, it's been now in every newspaper. Elton John announces he has forgiven me, bisexual, etc., etc. Were you quite prepared for the reaction that came with that?
Well, of course, if I was going to say something, then obviously people were going to pick it up.
You admitted to being bisexual.
Yeah.
What ramifications came from that? I mean, what came from that?
What came from it?
I mean,
well, I found that when I was driving around London, I got far more waves from taxi drivers and lorry drivers than I'd ever had before.
How much of it was said for shock value?
Not at all, because nobody, I mean, the only reason I'd never said it before is because no one had ever asked me before, you know? And Cliff Jar, who did the interview, was a very nice guy, and he just came out. He said, you can say, I'll turn the tape recorder off now if you want me to. I want to ask you a personal question. So I said, okay, go ahead. It makes a change from how many pairs of glasses have you got, or how much money do you earn a minute? Well, he said, he was very nice. He said, if you want me to, after you answer this question, I shall erase the tape, and you've got complete control, which is very nice. And he just said, are you bisexual? I said, well, yes. And he asked me, and I gave a very factual answer. It's a truthful answer. And I'm glad it's all out in the open now. I mean, the day it broke in England in the national press, I was flying from Scotland to Rochdale, which is a northern town, to see my football team play. And they picked up the Daily Mirror where it broke, and they travelled up on the train, and we sort of met halfway, and things were a little interesting.
I remember when it broke in the English paper, we were at Rochdale. We were in the 4th Division. And I was in Edinburgh, and I was flying down to Manchester. I was in Edinburgh or Glasgow, and my mother came into the room with a newspaper. She said, this will be interesting this afternoon, won't it?
There's been no backlash at all. I think really it's the non-event of the
football team doesn't ban you from the clubhouse or any such thing.
Or the shower room, folks.
At that time, Mike Keane was the manager, and we were in the 4th Division before Graham Taylor. I was chairman of the club, and it was
And I went down there and I thought, oh God, this is the last thing I want. But you know, he took me aside and said, listen, we've seen the papers, the players don't give, you know, you're the chairman of our club, we'll support you and whatever. And it was fantastic. I mean, I was so relieved about that because football has been a huge part of my life.
You know, why should you be so open? Why should you? Why should Elton John?
Well, I think most people in the industry knew it anyway. So I mean,
what brought that about? Though? Why should you tell?
Well, nobody had ever asked me before, really. And this guy from Rolling Stone, Cliff Jar, he was very nice and just came out and asked a question.
There are many people who do not live in New York or Los Angeles, these free-swinging bastions of liberal thought, who are extremely put off by any deviation from the norm. So when you make a comment about yourself or anybody else, do you ever wonder if you're putting off people who might be your audience?
Absolutely.
Putting them down, you know?
Yes, I think so. But one has a responsibility to oneself. It's easy for me to say, well, I'm bisexual, but I'm going to keep it a secret. Because to get it off my chest was such a great relief, and most people in the business knew anyway. And it does offend people, and a lot of people don't understand, and I understand that. But it also helps a lot of people that are in situations that may be gay or bisexual, who are in little towns and places like that. If someone comes out, I can't stand people in show business that are out and out screaming queens that keep saying, oh, I hate faggots, you know?
It was kind of common knowledge in the. I'm very fortunate to be in a business where it doesn't really, you know, that sort of thing is not sort of out of this world. It's almost as if I come from Mars or anything. I got a lot of letters from people in England, especially from kids that live in, well, not just kids, people that live in villages and towns where it's still very taboo, and it's very hard. It's very, you know, it's mentally a very hard thing to admit. To see someone, if you like their records, I suppose, if you like, and to see someone else say it kind of feels, I suppose, the letters they sent to me said, thanks for being on our side, or thanks for saying it. It's given me courage, which I never thought of, and if I help those people, then I'm glad I said it.
And I think you do have a responsibility. I needed to say it anyway. It's my own business. I don't flaunt it. I don't influence their lifestyle. But I needed to say it because there are other people. If other people are unhappy because they're being sexually, you know, if you think you're gay, it's a whole trip for a start. And if you live in a small community and it's really hard to do, if someone else you admire, say you buy records or a sports star says, you know, well, I've had that, you can, I don't know, I had a lot of letters from people that I never, it was at a time, again, in '76, I came off the road, said this whole thing, got all these letters, and they were all from people saying, thanks very much for saying this. And it brought me down, you lose touch, you lose reality with life being in the situation that I live in. And that, I was really touched, and I actually wrote back to all of them in my pidgin English, and I still write.
You did?
Yeah, and I still write to about 10 or 11 people in England who keep in touch because of that. And it's very important.
Weren't you afraid it would damage your position in popular music to say something like that? Has it indeed?
I think if you got your own interests at heart too much like that, if you're going to think, well, my career, what's going to happen, then I think you should get out of the business anyway because you get so obsessed with yourself. No, it was a perfectly honest answer to an honest question. I'm glad I said it.
You got your act together.
Well, I mean, it's so, you know, big deal.
Did that or did that not hurt your career?
It did in America a lot, yeah.
Did
I
it?
think, yeah, I was dropped like a hot potato.
Really?
By certain radio stations, yeah. Last time I was in Washington, they had a mass burning of my records. Not this tour, the last tour. But then they burnt Donny Osmond and Dean Martin. I thought, why the hell are they burning them? Maybe because they don't like Alcoholics either.
You don't have to flaunt it. It's up to the individual. It's a private thing, but I think for me, I had to get it off my chest. That was part of the unhappy side of me, getting it off my chest, which is really important for me.
And you know something, I was kind of embarrassed to bring it up, and I just wanted a little answer, but thanks for that answer, because I think it might be helpful to some people who may not have understood.
I can understand people not liking it, but I mean, hey, I'm sorry, you know, that's tough.
Exactly. Okay.
Are you comfortable now with your sexuality or with your homosexuality?
Yes.
Do you consider yourself bisexual?
No.
You consider yourself homosexual?
Yeah. I've tried it all, and I have a lot of great female friends. But if I'm to be totally truthful, I'm a homosexual man.
I met Renate, and it was one of those things that it was like there was never any question in my mind that we were going to get married.
When you say that you had no doubt in your mind that you were going to marry, it was still a spur of the moment thing, wasn't it?
Yeah, but it was, again, as I said before, and 5 or 6 gut instincts and things in my life, I knew I had to do it. And we'd never been out together, except more or less for the time, once in Montserrat, and once in Sydney when I proposed. And
was it a whirlwind romance? Because you haven't really talked about it. We saw the wedding, and then you've done this world tour and all the rest of it. Was it a whirlwind romance, or had you been cogitating it for a long time?
Well, I'd often done that. But it was, yes, it was kind of whirlwind. But I know I'd met her before. Renate's an engineer, and I'd met her on the previous album, and she was engineering on the Breaking Hearts album.
Was it true that you asked her over a meal of curry?
Yeah, absolutely, in Sydney, and she doesn't drink wine. And I said, would you like some wine? She thought, well, you must like wine, so I ordered a bottle of white wine, and I don't drink white wine. So we sat there, and we were both sipping this wine, thinking, oh, Christ, I hate this. I never went out with my wife before we got married. I mean, it's like, I knew we were going to get married. I knew I should get married to her. And we never, we went out for a curry, and that was it. We got married. And it was great to do it like that, but there was no sort of pre-romance or anything.
And it was just a chemistry between the two of us, and I had no doubts, and I thought that my time of life, it's about time I took the plunge. And we had no serious thoughts about, well, obviously we had serious thoughts because getting married is a serious thing. You can't take it flippantly.
Yeah.
What a gamble.
Yeah, but I've always gambled on things that are gut feelings in my career. Doing certain things, I just knew it was right, and if I hadn't taken the gamble at that time, I would have been very, very sorry, because I just wanted to. I wanted to change my lifestyle. I just wanted to make an effort and see if I could do it. And I just knew that if I didn't seize that opportunity, I'd probably regret it.
So how's married life suiting you?
It's nearly a year, So we've seen each other 3 times. But no, we're very happy.
Has being married changed you? I mean, changed your lifestyle or changed your way of thinking about things? Or?
Not really. It's made me much more tolerant and much. But then Watford happened to do that in a way. It's been good. And it's worked out really well, and it's getting better and better. And it's 3 years next February, and a lot of people. I mean, I knew I was setting myself up. I got some wonderful telegrams. You may be on the floor. You may be standing, but we're all on this blank floor. But I mean, you have to expect that, because my former lifestyle was not that of one conducive to getting married.
She's a German lady.
Yeah.
Is there anything of the Teuton in her? Does she have strict ideas? Does she keep you in line?
Yeah, I think most people around me keep me in line, otherwise I'd go completely off the rails. That applies to people at Watford Football Club and my family, my mother and my father, the people who work for me. Because sometimes when in this business, you think you're the right and you can get everything you want, and you're very hot-headed, and people around me just ignore me, which is the best thing to do. So I slam doors, and after 10 minutes, no one's come, and I'm going, where are they all? And I know I think everybody around me has been pretty level-headed as they treat me, because I'm a monster sometimes. I may be the nice little boy next door, but you should see me sometime.
Now, according to Elton and Renate, it's only a matter of time before they have their first child.
When can we expect all these little Johns running around the house?
Good God, I don't know. When I lash it to a toothpick, I suppose.
Will you have more than one child?
I don't know. Let's try and start with one if we can. But I mean, again, that's not something that's. I mean, I've read in the Daily Mail in London now that I'm going to see specialists because I have trouble with my sperm. I mean, can you believe this? I can cope with it quite well. It gets a bit hurtful for Renate because she's never been used to that. But it becomes ludicrous that we actually had counselling with the Duke and Duchess of York. Can you imagine ringing up? Your Highness, I must come over and discuss the fact that we're not.
And this is a couple who have been married 3 minutes themselves.
I mean, yes. And we are very close. I mean, it hurts her to see that, I can cope with all that press because I've been used to it, but when you see things and they do make up things, it gets to her a little. She's getting better at it, and she's been a major brick as far as that's concerned. We're very strong, people are always going to gossip.
I was exhausted mentally and physically. I didn't know what I wanted out of life. The voice thing coming out. I wanted to stay in Australia, watch the cricket. I don't know. I can't explain what it was. I couldn't even explain it to her. It was nothing to do with a great big row or anything like that. And she took the whole situation very well because she's a very elegant and she's a great lady. And she understood that, and she went away, and she lived in London for a while. And when all this thing in the Sun happened, I said, listen, you've got to come back here, because she was being hounded as well. And so we went through it together, and it brought us back together. Every couple's going to have their ups and downs, whether it's with me or in show business or any occupation. And it's nice that she's back, and I'm not a very good person to live with as far as I'm very deep. I get up in the morning, I don't say a word for an hour or so. I don't talk very much, which is one of my faults. You wouldn't have judged it by the way I'm going on here. But I mean, in the relationship, because I think basically because I've been so busy. I mean, I've had 3 or 4 years of just doing non-stop work. And when I've been actually, that's 3 or 4 years I've been married. So it was nothing to do with her at all. It was me trying to work my own self out. And as a result of this, it's all come back together again, which is lovely.
Yeah. Do you love each other?
I always will love her, yeah, absolutely. I think she loves me and I love her. You know, it's just certain situations, right, where we'll have a row or we'll have a parting of the ways for a couple of months. But I mean, that happens to every couple. I think we understand each other a lot more because of what's gone on. And yeah, I do love her. I always will.
I think everybody was very sad when you put out that statement saying that you were going to be separated. Do you think you were forced into putting out that statement?
I wasn't forced into it, but I mean, it was very hurtful for her. It kind of was a bit for us. Like the press actually, and again, saying that I think the press treated us very well because I think the press knew there was something wrong, and I kept saying, no, it's okay, and she did as. And in fact, it wasn't as good as we were making it out to be. And I think the press could have hauled us over the coals a lot more than they did. And I think they were very supportive in that. And I'd like to thank them for it. They could have had a heyday with Renate and I, but they didn't.
Conducting a marriage in the spotlight can't be easy. Anyway, I mean, you're probably much more used to the spotlight than Renate ever was.
Yeah, Renate was just an engineer in a studio, and she's adapted so well to the lifestyle. I mean, it hasn't been easy. But I think she's a very elegant lady, and she's a very dignified lady. And whatever she's done in the situation that we parted was nothing to do with her. It was to do with my brain being fried after 3 or 4 years hard work. So she's been wonderful.
I really don't want to go into to talk about the marriage situation because throughout the whole thing, my wife behaved in such a dignified way.
Yeah.
And she's trying to build a life of her own. And I really don't want to speak about it too much in public because it's very difficult for her in a situation like that. And all I can say, she was very dignified. I do miss not seeing her, but that's the situation we're in, and I just really don't want to talk about that. Just for her sake. Is that okay?
Would you, of course. I didn't really mean to talk about your marriage, but about whether you
whether
you would consider being married again. Whether you'd want to.
I wouldn't think so.
Yeah.
No.
What about children? Would you like to have a family?
It's a bit late now. It's.
He says,
I don't know. You can never run any, but I wouldn't.
No, surely not too late.
I think I'm married. I've just realised I'm married to my career, and that's it.
Did you get married to prove that you were not gay?
No, I got married because I didn't confront the real problem in my life, that I was a drug addict. I thought getting married would change all the unhappiness that the drug addiction brought me. And of course, I got married to a wonderful woman who loved me very much. And I loved her, but not in obviously in the physical sense. And I thought it would change it. I thought, this will change my life. I'll now become happy. But the problem was that when I got married, I still stuck cocaine up my nose. I still drank a bottle of scotch a day. Nothing changed. I first started taking drugs in 1973, and it was at Caribou I was recording. And I didn't, honestly, I was so naive. I walked into a room off of one of the studios, and there were people snorting this stuff. I said, what on earth is that? What on earth is that? And they were all horrified to know that I'd just walked in because they were trying to keep it from me.
I only started taking drugs because I thought, well, all my life I've been kind of on the verge of the in crowd. At school I was on the verge of the gang. I'll join in and be a big man.
I lived my in the 20s. I lived my teenage years in my 20s. I mean, I was I was always quite plump, and I had weight problems from the word go when I was a child. And it was always, I was never allowed to wear the most fashionable clothes, even though or shoes or whatever. So when I became my own boss, as it were, when I became Elton John, I became successful in 1970. I decided that I could do things what I wanted to do. I made up for lost time. I probably took things a lot farther than I should have done. You know, I made up for my teenage years, in which I was very withdrawn and very quiet, to being very extrovert and just doing exactly what I wanted.
The first few years of my use of cocaine was okay. It was social, and I found it to be an aphrodisiac, which most people don't. But I have the sort of personality that once I try something and once I like something, I have to have more of it. And I have an addict's personality.
You know, drugs and alcohol are really an escapism from what's
troubling you. I mean, I'm not very good with confrontation. I wasn't very good at expressing how I felt. So drugs were an escape. And of course, then when you're on drugs, you think you're being so fabulous and truthful. And, you know, I love you, I really love you. You know, you're the best person in the world. You wake up the next morning, you invite people for dinner, and then you stay in bed because you don't want to see them. It's that syndrome. It's, you know, it's the bullshit syndrome.
In the early days, it wasn't too bad, and we had, you know, fun, and it was, you know, not. But, you know, drugs lead to very irrational decisions about one's personal partners, about, you know, and it became worse and worse and worse. And at the end, it was just, I wasn't even getting any enjoyment out of it. I was just doing it just for the sake of it.
It was probably the silliest decision I ever made in my life, because it led to a lot of partying, a lot of incredibly bad behavior, incredibly mood swings, a lot of misery, a lot of unhappiness. And of course, if you try and have a relationship and drugs and drink are involved, then there's never going to be a success story at the end of it. You can't have that and have a happy relationship. I'm an intelligent man, and I thought, you know, I can do this by myself. And there were times when I stopped for 6, 9 months, sometimes a year, but I always went back to it. And every time you go back to it, it's worse. And the drugs were the worst thing. The drink was really to come down off the drugs. But there's no denying that I was an alcoholic as well, because I needed to drink a bottle and a half of scotch at night to come down off the
every night?
More or less, when I was doing cocaine, yeah. Neat scotch, Johnny Walker Black.
I think when I was drinking and doing drugs, yes, because of the wallpaper on the plane or the way it's done, you don't like the colour of the furniture in the hotel room. It's all that absolute nonsense.
I think I'm a fairly nice person, but when I was on drugs or I was drinking a lot, I was very irresponsible, and nobody knew from 1 minute to the next how I was going to be. And I've had a lot of people that I loved a lot. My mother moved countries. She left England. She went and moved to Spain. So I'm off. And I can hardly blame her. Most of all, I helped myself. And that shame, you know, when you're purging yourself with your fingers down your throat, when you're eating, when you're doing grams of coke, and when you're doing 2 bowls of scotch a night, you don't have much self-esteem. And then you have to go on stage and pretend that you do. And so that makes you even more ashamed of yourself, saying, what kind of life am I living?
I wasn't functioning as a person. Everyone did everything for me. You know, apart from the fact that I bathed myself when I went to the toilet. I think that was about the only 2 things that I seemed to be able to do. And I'm 43 years old, and that's pathetic. And it's, you know, let it get to that stage where I become completely dependent on everybody else. And it's a very sad reflection of how far I'd let my life slip away from me.
How did you notice it changing your personality?
Well, I lost all my friends. I mean, and all the people that loved me didn't want to know me. My mother left the country, and, you know, you find yourself in the most degrading situations. Your personal habits, you don't wash. You lose all sense of pride and all sense of esteem, and you can't seem to stop.
Were there times you didn't think you'd make it?
A couple of times, yeah. A couple of times when I was, you know, having chest pains or, you know, staying up for 3 days at a time and having, you know, I used to have spasms, and I would be found on the floor, and they'd put me back to bed, and half an hour later I'd be doing the same thing.
I was very unhappy. I had everything. I was Elton John. I had everything that money could buy, but I was really unhappy. So, classic sob story.
Then, a few months later, there was his second attempt at suicide, when he swallowed dozens of sleeping tablets.
That was me being stupid, but the people ignored me. My grandmother said, you know, I'm going home, all right, we might as well go home, which was the perfect thing, you know, you don't fuss over people.
This is when you swallowed the 95 pills?
Yeah, and went up to announce, you know, I was going to drown, or I threw myself in the swimming pool with a huge heavy toweling dressing gown and then was fighting for life. I mean, and my grandmother just said, well, we might as well go home then. Not a bit of sympathy did I get, and not a bit of sympathy did I deserve. I mean, if I had fallen by the wayside, I'd have had people that would have tried to stop me.
When I was just fed up with myself, personally, and a bit stale, you know, it was I could go on stage and people would, you know, clap before I did anything, and it was it became a little routine, to say the least.
Just looking at myself, there was an unofficial biography by Philip Norman last year, and there were some pictures in that book that are frightening. And I look at them now, and I look at myself now, I think,
God, I look 20 years older than I do now, and the only tangible thing left I had in my career was my career, and I wanted to destroy that too. And I didn't seem to be able to, because at the end of the day, I'm a loyal person, and I wanted to go out and work for the people, because I employ a lot of people. So because I'm, in a way, it's so nice, it kept me going. And that part, the good part of my character kept me going. And I didn't destroy the only tangible thing I had left.
How could you get out on that stage? Why didn't you walk out and flop over that piano or electric keyboard? How did you walk out?
I don't know. I have a very strong constitution.
Boy,
yeah, I have a very strong constitution and a very stubborn streak.
So you were really stoned is the mildest word one could use.
Yeah, I mean, I was on the planet whenever, I was on my own planet, I think.
Were you able to perform while drunk?
I wasn't particularly drunk on stage, but I did take drugs before I went on stage, and I was able to perform. In fact, ironically, Larry, I think the fact that I did keep performing and not stay home and shut myself away and do drugs all the time, I mean, it wasn't a constant thing with me, but when I'd stopped, when I started again, it became worse. So I think the fact that I did make records and did tour saved my life, because even though I went on stage under the influence of drugs sometimes, at least I wasn't doing the amount of drugs I would have been doing if I'd have been staying at home.
In fact, the only tangible thing that I had left in my life was my career. It's the only thing I hadn't destroyed. I destroyed my relationship with my family, with my friends, and the only thing I hadn't destroyed was my career, and it was still there, and I hated it.
But I was saved by the fact that I could go on stage and play music. That saved me. I mean, two days before a show, and you're having your stomach pumped, and then I have to play the biggest show of my life. I did it, and that's what music did for me for the whole time. It got me through the tough times I was suffering when I wasn't playing music. As I said in the movie, it just saved me. Music's always saved me.
What was that moment with you, though? Was there just one thing that precipitated it? Was it an event?
I was confronted by someone who I was in a relationship with. I went out with someone from Atlanta, and he checked himself into a rehab clinic in Tucson, and I was really furious and angry, and I visited him there, and we sat knee to knee, and a counselor either side, and they said, "What is it that annoys you about your partner?" And I went, well, he's a bit untidy and he doesn't put the CDs back in the case. And then they asked my friend, "What do you annoy you about Elton?" And they said, "Well, he's a bulimic, he's a drug addict, he's an alcoholic, he's a liar."
You talked about the day it changed with someone you cared about. It's an awful big, change in one day.
Somebody that I was in a relationship with from America, he said that I was a drug addict, that I was an alcoholic, that I was a bulimic, I was a liar, that I was totally... I mean, he didn't leave anything... I mean, it was the whole works.
He didn't about drugs, he didn't know I was on drugs, but he knew I was on drink, and I would turn up and he said, one day he just put a bottle of brandy in front of me. He said, "Come on, why don't you drink the old bottle?" He said, "That's what you like." He said, "If you turn up for another first team game looking like you did on Boxing Day," he said, I'll have you. And I was so astonished that someone could talk to me like that. And they thought at that point, he thought I was going to just hit him and walk out the door. And by that time, I knew that it was time to surrender and say, "Yes, you're right."
And I sat there and I was trembling and I cried, and he cried because he thought that I would just storm out the room, which was my normal behavior for someone saying that to me. And I was so relieved, and I said, "Yeah, you're right."
So looked at my life and look, you complain about everything. You complain about the colour of your jet. You complain if the hotel suite doesn't have the right flowers in it. Your life is totally and utterly out of order, completely. You are a selfish pig. It was the bottom for me, the bottom to realise how low I'd become.
I just assumed that because I was successful and rich and fairly intelligent, then I could do it on my own. I knew I had a problem. I mean, but I just couldn't fix it myself. I needed other people's help and advice. So my pride was killing me, in fact, the fact that I didn't want to admit that I had a problem. And the hardest thing for me was I thought I could solve everything myself. I can do this. I'm intelligent. Right. I'm wealthy. I'm rich. I'm successful. Why can't I do this? I can do this. I couldn't. And for 16 years, I couldn't say I need help. Those 3 words which will save your life. I need help. And as soon as I said that, I was away and haven't looked back since.
3 words changed my life. I need help. And I couldn't say those words for 16 years because I thought it was a sign of weakness. I thought I was clever enough to do it all on my own. And there are some things in life you cannot do on your own. And it's much better to share and to reach out. I learned that lesson, and I wish I'd have had the ability to be a bit more humble earlier on and have a bit more humility, but I'm afraid that's what addiction does to you. It doesn't register in that way. You think you know everything.
Just say though, if you're in pain and you're afraid to reach out because you think people will think you're weak, or you feel ashamed of asking for help, just swallow your pride. Your pride will kill you. Just ask for help, and people will be there to give it to you.
And I went there for 6 weeks, and the best 6 weeks of my life, in a way, because I got so much stuff out. I started to be ruthlessly honest, and I listened, and I started a new life. No, you're left with the same person, but you just have to, it's like being a baby, you have to start to walk again and learn how to become a human being and listen to instructions and follow them to try and put your life back together. Luckily, I'd made the decision, and I listened to people, which I don't normally do, for a year or so, well, more than a year or so, and I did take the precautions of listening to what they had to say, and I did everything they had to tell me to do, and my life came back together. It was just like, I've got to learn how to live and how to, do things right, and change my life completely. It was like learning to be a human again, and I was learning to walk properly, learning to treat people properly, writing letters to apologize to people, but just being able to have a life without all that rubbish. And waking up in the morning and feeling good about yourself. I took to it like a duck to water.
It was an immense relief for me. It was hard. I tried to run away twice.
What, you just took off?
I had an incredible problem with authority figures. I mean, I always have done in my life, and that was the only problem. I actually enjoyed, once I decided to actually do something about my health and my addictions.
I really enjoyed it because I learned about myself. I learned how I work, what makes me tick, what doesn't make me tick.
I mean, you look like a different person. Your energy is different. You came out of a very dark period.
Yeah. That dark period lasted for 16 years. Towards the end, it was very dark.
I'm still working on changing myself. There's a lot to prove. I mean, I've still got a long way to go. I mean, 4.5 years I've changed, and I don't drink, I don't take drugs, but I'm still working on myself and the bad habits that I have, and trying to change 43 years of bad behavior. It doesn't happen overnight.
I keep a very rigorous schedule, but my schedule is all around my health, my spiritual well-being, and really trying to stay clean. And I love this new life. I mean, I never knew life could be as good as this.
Can you be around people who do drugs now?
No.
You can't be.
I don't mind being around people who drink, but it's very, all my friends drink. I have no problem with that. I would never tell someone they can't drink. And I don't have a problem with that. I can smell drugs. Especially when you play in America, you can smell it. But I mean, cocaine, I can see if someone's on it, and I have to leave because it just freaks me out.
Do you consider yourself a survivor?
Oh, absolutely. I am a survivor. I've survived a lot of things. Life is full of, pitfalls, even when you're sober, and you have to. I can deal with them now because I don't have to run away and hide, and I have someone wonderful in my life to help me through them. What I couldn't do when I was an addict was communicate, except when I was on cocaine. I thought I could because you talk rubbish. But I had I have a confrontation problem, which I don't have anymore, because I've learned how that if you don't communicate and you don't talk about things, then you're never going to find a solution. And I've dealt with grief, I've dealt with disaster, I've dealt with great things happening, and I've been able to do it. I found a partner of 19 years, I have a son, I have a career, I have wonderful friends. I'm the luckiest person in the world. I'm sitting here now and I have a #1 album in Britain, which I haven't had for 20 years. Do you think I'd still have that if I was doing drugs and alcohol? I wouldn't be here, I'd be dead. And I am content. I have nothing to complain about. I have had my redemption. I can be proud of myself now.
Actually, what we were talking about was the AIDS scene, about gay people who are younger, and how it, how frightening it must be for them to come out anyway. It's always a terrible torment for gay people to come out. But for gay kids, it missed me like doubly. I mean, it's just awful. I'm very committed to the AIDS thing. If I'm going to do charity things, I would try and concentrate on doing things like that.
One of the rumours circulating down under is that you went to Atlanta. We know that you had a house there, but in fact it was said that you were there for treatment for AIDS. Have you been tested? Are you HIV positive?
Oh, well, there was this program in America called, is it Hard Copy or something like that? They asked me to do an interview, and I said, no, we've done all our interviews. And they said, well, if you don't do an interview, we're going to tell everybody that you went to Atlanta for this. There's a Center for Disease Control in Atlanta. And they threatened to come into my building that I live in, and they threatened to buzz me with a helicopter, which they did. So we sued them, and they dropped it like hot bricks. I'm tested on a regular basis. I am not HIV positive. I have lots of friends who are, and I intend to do something for them and do concerts and raise money for those people who are less fortunate than myself, but I'm not.
Because basically, I mean, after all that hanky-panky that I got up to in the 1970s and 80s, I came out of it all HIV negative, and so there must have been a reason for me to get sober and to do something good. I'm very aware that when I got sober, I was very lucky to have survived what I put myself through. I also wasn't at the forefront of the AIDS protest organizations that happened in the 1980s, like ACT UP, right. Because I was too self-absorbed in, my own world. There's so much lost time that I had to make up for, and I regret and apologize for not being there to the gay community in those days when it was desperately needed to be there and be counted, stand up and be counted, and I didn't, and I feel ashamed of that. I became very friendly with the Ryan White family, with Ryan and his mother Jeannie. And that helped me a lot to see how out of whack my life was, how impossible my life had become, how self-obsessed I'd become. And shortly after Ryan died, which I was at the funeral for in Indianapolis, and I played at the funeral, I decided 6 months later that my life was, pretty horrible.
And I went to his funeral, I played at his funeral, and if you look at videotape and you go back into your vaults and you see me playing at the funeral, I'm huge. I'm white hair, overweight, sad, vacuous. And I spent that week in Indianapolis with Jeannie White, Andrew White, and Ryan when he was dying. And I got touched.
To laugh and cry, to live and die, in the brightness of my day.
It wasn't long after the Ryan White funeral, in time, that I decided, yes, this is I've got to do this. I went to a confrontation between the person I was in a relationship with, and I admitted that I made a mistake and I needed help. As soon as I said I needed help, I came back to life spiritually, and I knew I would get well because I said those three magic words.
I went into rehab, and I've been this year. Hopefully in July I'll be 18 years sober and clean. And as soon as I got sober and clean, I thought, you know what? I've been so fortunate to have been a drunk and been a drug addict and not become HIV positive, and I've got to do something to help people like Ryan White and the people that I kind of betrayed when I was doing those kind of things. And so I decided, because I have experience, I used to be chairman of a football club in England, a soccer club, I thought, this is a good chance for me to prove that I can do something positive now. And when I got sober, I thought I'd start my own foundation. I did a concert for Elizabeth Taylor at Madison Square Garden for her foundation. And Elizabeth's been the great role model for me.
What does it do?
When it started, it was for direct care to people at that time who needed food deliveries, medical deliveries, buddies. I used to actually deliver food in Atlanta for Project Open Hand.
Now what?
Now it's still for direct care, but for education. And we've spread our wings. It was just in America and Great Britain when we started. Now we're over 55 countries. And I think the AIDS Foundation has really been responsible for raising $350 million worldwide with matching funds in the 12 years that we've been together.
Are you in love now?
Yeah, I am.
Can you tell us anything about him?
Well, I only that he's fantastic and has a career of his own, which is very important. I've made a lot of mistakes before.
This is not the person now is not the person who confronted you and.
No, I'm being secretive about it because I want to protect him and I want to protect us. And but I'm exceedingly happy with him.
And I found someone who wants to be with me forever, who's committed. And I never really found that before. Well, I met David 3 years into my sobriety. And I'd gone back to England and I said, you know what? I'm just going to concentrate on my sobriety. I don't want to have another relationship. I'm not ready for another relationship. I was too immature. And then I invited some people down to dinner and David was one of those people. And I always used to chase love. I had to be in a relationship. If I wasn't in a relationship, I could never be on my own for 5 minutes, and that is not healthy. And I hit it off with him, and we went out together for 6 months before he finally moved in with me. And he's been with me ever since. It's one of the great journeys of being sober and clean is that you have to be confrontational. I hate confrontation. I always used to hate confrontation. And being in a relationship is all about communication, and he's very good at that with me. Who could be happier than me? But it's only as a result of by getting and doing the right thing, actually becoming an adult for once, that this all happened.
I think I asked you before, are you going to get married?
No. No, I mean, that's been in the papers. We've been having babies, we've been getting married. With my hips, I could probably get married and have babies. So far, I would say that if I could protect David, because if I die and I leave everything to David, or he's the beneficiary of my will, he doesn't get the same benefits as if your wife, if you died, your wife. So it's very unfair. I mean, I'm not keen on marriage. To be honest,
I'll look into it for you.
Thank you very much. Yes.
You talk about David Furnish with great affection and respect. And we have a major issue now in this country, and probably in yours, and that's the business of gay marriage, of people being allowed to be married legally, to men, to women. What do you feel about that?
Well, I think it is a hot potato. David and I have lived together 10 years, 10 and a half, nearly. If I died tomorrow and I have a will that leaves something, more or less everything to David, my family could come in and contest it. And I've seen it happen to so many gay couples. In England, the Civil Liberties Act is coming in, where David and I will be able to go and register as a couple, and we will have the same rights. I don't want to get married. It's not my choice. That's an individual thing. But I think people have the right, as gay or straight or whatever, if they live with people, to be protected, to protect their other half.
Since you were last here, you tied the knot with your longtime partner, David Furnish. What is that like in a male tied the knot? When males tie the knot, is it a marriage?
No, I don't think it is a marriage. I mean, it's called a civil partnership in Great Britain. And a lot of people said, oh, well, it's like a marriage. But it's not really the same as a marriage, I don't think. It might, I mean, we'd lived together for 12 years before, we did that. But it was the first day of the legislation becoming legal in England. And we wanted to say to people, listen, we're going to do it. We approve of this. I'd seen so many cases of gay couples, one of them dying, and the person who died had left their money to the partner, and then the families came in and the partner was left with nothing. It just gave people basic rights that married people had. But I don't really consider it a marriage. I just consider it a blissful extension of what we had already. And what we had was pretty special. But I actually felt, and David felt differently after that. I think it gave us a real sense of security and satisfaction. And I think everybody who lives with someone and who is committed to someone should have that sense of security.
But you said you don't care if it's marriage or not.
No, but I just think people should have this, if you love someone, you should have the chance to commit to them for life. And it's just, and I know that is a very, very sore point with a lot of people, and I understand that. But I mean, being a gay person, the fact that I can commit to David and say to him, listen, I want to be with you for the rest of my life. And we have the security knowing that if anything happens to either of us, that everything's going to be fantastic. If I can leave things to David and he's not going to have a battle with my family. Not that my family would ever do that, because they wouldn't. But it's just the knowledge that you can wake up in the morning and feel safe.